So how did Strong Survivors get started? Well, when I was at University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, Colorado, working on my PhD, I discovered the Rocky Mountain Cancer Rehab Institute and discovered that they were using exercise as a therapeutic tool to help cancer survivors. And now, at this point in the early part of the story, we got to travel back in time. And we traveled back in time to when I was 14, and my cousin, Julie Honerkamp, was 13 years old. And she and I were the best of friends. We liked the same music, the same movies, our sense of humor was the same, we liked the same TV shows, books, etc. We were like two peas in a pod. And when she was 13, she was diagnosed with an osteosarcoma in her thigh above her right knee. And at the time, they determined that the best mode of treatment would be to amputate. So they amputated her leg above the knee. She learned to walk with a prosthetic limb. And for the first little while, it looked like she was going to beat that cancer. But of course, she was going through scans to make sure that the cancer had not metastasized to other areas of the body. And that's exactly, unfortunately, what happened, where it showed up in her lungs, took out a kidney at one point, and eventually showed up in her brain. And over the course of 5 years that she battled the disease, she went through countless chemotherapies, countless radiation treatments, some experimental treatments, many different surgeries. And I was able to kind of see firsthand how someone goes through that process. And at a time in my life where I was going basically from age 14 to age 19, where both she and I did a lot of growing up during that particular time. I remember having a conversation with her, and I knew that she was brave. I knew that she was tough. But we were having a conversation, and it was about a year before she passed away, and she said, you know what? I want to keep fighting this, but I also see kind of the handwriting on the wall, and if it's time for me to die, I'm ready to die. And I look back on that and I think, man, she was only 17 years old at the time, and she was brave enough to be able to say, hey, I've only lived 17 years of my life, and the last part of it has been filled with cancer and cancer treatment, and I'm ready. I feel like I've fought a good fight. And I always look back on that and I think, you know, that is just the bravest thing I think I've ever heard another human being say in the course of my life. So now fast forward in time a little bit, and I'm in my sophomore year at Alma College up in Michigan. And I know that my cousin is not doing very well, and the cancer has returned. He's trying to go through some treatments, but it's not working extremely well. And I get a call from my mom that she has had to go into the hospital and she has slipped into a coma. And my mom, I could tell, you know, that it was that the end was nigh. But then she said, you know, if you want to get here before she's gone, you better come relatively soon. So I got a hold of a good friend of mine from my hometown, Scott Schessel, who had a car. He drove me down to Hastings, which is about 2 hours away from Alma, where I was going to school. I grabbed my dad's car and I started driving for downtown Chicago. And that trip is usually somewhere between 3 to 4 hours, depending on traffic. And I started out at about 6 in the evening. So I was hoping to get there, you know, sometime around, you know, 10 or 11 o'clock at night at the latest. And for those of you who know Northern Illinois, Southern Michigan, Northern Indiana well, you know that that area around the southern tip of Lake Michigan is very prone to sudden snowstorms in the spring. And this was in April, and there was a huge snowstorm that was occurring, and there was lots of lake effect snow. And at one point, I'm driving along thinking, am I going to have to like pull off? Because it was basically whiteout conditions. Slowed down to, you know, at numerous times, 10 to 20 miles an hour, just creeping along the freeway, but thinking, no, I have to get there. No, I have to get there. Finally, about 8.5, 9 hours later, I pulled into the parking garage in downtown Chicago at the hospital that she was at, parked my car, ran into the hospital, went to the reception desk, and I asked the woman who was working there, I'm looking for Julie Honerkamp. She's in the ICU. She doesn't have long. I need to get to her room. And the idea of customer service is tough, but when it's the middle of the night and you've probably been there on a long shift, it's difficult to deal with a young whippersnapper like myself. But I've always kind of prided myself on, no matter what the situation is, being able to read the person who's in front of me. And clearly, I must have looked really disheveled. I must have looked really stressed out. But she started to give me directions to get to the ICU, and it was like down this hallway, up this elevator, down this stairwell. Basically, my head was swimming at that point, and there was no way I was going to be able to get there. And luckily, there was a nurse who went behind her as she was giving these directions, and she steps forward. She goes, "Hold on a second, honey, what do you need?" And I was like, "I need to find Julie Honerkamp's room. She's in the ICU." She's like, "I'll take you there." And she took me on this voyage through the bowels of the hospital. I swear we went through the cafeteria, we went through the morgue, we went through everywhere in this hospital, but it basically got us there in about 4 minutes, running the whole way. And this woman was, I would not say she was the most fit person in the world, and she was outrunning me the entire time, even with these long getaway sticks that I have. She got me to the room, and she gave me a big bear hug and said, "Honey, good luck, you're here." And I didn't even get her name. She went off. I was sucking wind like crazy, and she wasn't even breathing heavily. I'll never be able to figure that one out. But went in the room, and the first person I saw was my mother, and she could tell that I was stressed. I was wound up, and she just said, "It's okay. She's still here." So I breathed a big sigh of relief, and I went over to her bedside, and she was hooked up to a whole bunch of equipment that was helping her breathe. My aunt and uncle were off in the corner. My cousin John was sitting not far from the bed. I kind of nodded to them, and I went over to her bedside, and I said my goodbyes to her. And that is something that, if you've ever done that, whether the person is cognizant of what you're saying or not, it's definitely something that you're always going to remember. And it's going to shake you, and it's going to shape you. Shake and shape. Shake you up and then shape your life. And that's exactly what it did for me. But the moment that really got me was after I had stepped back from the bed. I hugged my mom. I went over and hugged my aunt and uncle. They were talking to the doctor, so I kind of let them be. I hugged my cousin John. And all of a sudden, there were noises that came from the equipment that she was hooked up to. And we all sort of looked at each other and then gathered around the bed because we had a feeling what was about to happen. And come to find out, my aunt and uncle had been talking to the doctor in the corner about the idea of removing her from life support because there just wasn't a whole lot of hope. And my cousin, in her own tough way, decided, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and take this one on myself and ease their suffering a bit. So we're all gathered around the bed, and I watched my cousin, my best friend, take the last breaths that she would ever take in this life and pass away. Like I said, shake and shape. That moment has stuck with me from then until this present moment. In fact, I've told this story numerous times, and I've finally kind of gotten to the point where I get emotional, but I don't necessarily break down in a pool of tears. Although every once in a while I still do, depending on the moment. But when I went to northern Colorado, I was meeting with Dr. Carolyn Dennehy, who was actually one of the founders of Rocky Mountain Cancer Rehab. And I had no idea that she and Dr. Carol Schneider had founded this unique program. I was just meeting with her because she was supposed to be my dissertation advisor, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to complete this PhD degree. And she asked me if I had ever heard of cancer rehab, and she said, you know, we use exercise as a therapeutic tool to help cancer survivors get through their treatment and recovery period. And in that moment, it was one of those light bulb moments, one of those moments where, you know, you feel like the universe is perfectly functioning, all the planets are aligned and all that type of stuff. And Dr. Dennehy still teases me to this day about the fact that I'm sitting across from her and she says that line, and all I did for the next about 30 seconds is just mouth breathing, staring at her. And she thought, you know, maybe there's something wrong with this kid. Maybe he's having a stroke or a seizure of some kind. And she was just about to say, "Are you okay?" And all she got out was, "Are you?" And I said, "That's it! That's what I want to do." Because in that moment, I thought back on all of that history with my cousin, and I thought, here is a way that I can use exercise, something that I love to learn about, I love to teach, I love to show people how to do different types of exercise, and I can work with people who are going through the same crap. Pardon my rough language, my colorful language, but the same crap that she went through during her 5-year battle with cancer. And I thought, yes, this is exactly where I want to be. So I learned all about cancer rehab, and then in 2004, my wife Julie and I moved here to Carbondale. And we both started teaching at SIU, and not long after that, we established the Strong Survivors program, and we've been doing that ever since. So, if you've ever wondered what Strong Survivors is all about, that's the basis for it, and that's why it's such a personal passion project for me. If you have any additional questions about the program, about the class at John A. Logan, about the Cancer Rehab Lab, home-based sessions, and you can find a lot of that information on our Strong Survivors website, which is strong-survivors at siu.edu. Strong-survivors at siu.edu. Once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'll take any questions that you might have.